say again to remind all the members of the committee, because we're on the legislative internet network, it helps if you will press the button in front of your microphone there on the banister right in front of you when you wish to speak or ask a question, and you won't be recognized until you press that button. That lets us know up here on the board that you wish to ask a question, and then you'll be recognized. If you don't mash that button, it doesn't turn your microphone on either, and it may not be picked up over the internet. So I just want to emphasize the importance of that. I want to look at two things today, if we could. And one, to begin with, we've had a lot of different emergency crises come up across this nation, particularly here recent related to the hurricane and Katrina. And with that in mind, I thought that it might be good for us as the Banks and Banking Committee to have a chance, first of all, to meet our new Commissioner of Banks and Banking. If you've not yet met Commissioner Braswell, you'll have that opportunity in just a moment. But also to just sort of get an update on the state of emergency of preparedness that the state of Georgia is in. If all of a sudden all of our power was to be lost, where would we be in the financial institutions across this state? And how would we handle that as the Department of Banks and Banking? So without any further ado, at this time I'd like to ask our new Commissioner of Banks and Banking, Commissioner Braswell, if you would come and address the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Mills. I'll give you the shorter version since I know in the interest of time. The Banking Department developed an emergency preparedness and business resumption plan in 2004. We tested it in November of 2004, and we're generally very pleased with the results. However, with the Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita, we now understand that we need to expand our plans to not only include how the banking department and our services will be up and running and how we can resume business, but how the industry as a whole in the state of Georgia can maintain its banking services for its consumers. So we are in the process of expanding that effort. 2 weeks ago we talked with the FDIC and their leadership over the Atlanta Regional Office, and we'll be working together to develop a plan in which we are working in conjunction with the industry trade groups, as well as GEMA, as well as the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, the National Credit Union Administration, all the regulators combined, as well as the industry, to ensure that we have the processes in place to maintain banking services for the citizens of Georgia. We have also learned from our neighboring states, very much so. We have already received a lot of information from Florida, who have, of course, suffered through many of the natural disasters over recent years. And so we have that information and are gleaning things from that and putting it into our plan, as well as we have, our senior deputy and myself have heard the commissioners from Mississippi and Louisiana and give us firsthand accounts of what happened and things that they learned, as well as perhaps additional powers that they had to utilize during that time. And I'll get to that in just a second. From Florida's plan, as well as talking with the commissioners from Mississippi and Louisiana, the things that we have determined that we need to incorporate or to include sample emergency proclamations. Is the statute such that in case we had a large natural disaster or regional disaster of any sort, that the commissioner has the power to invoke, I guess, emergency procedures. As an example, the commissioner from Mississippi said he told his bankers during the middle of the crisis there that it's best to you do whatever you need to do to get banking services to the consumers, as well as protecting your employees, and you ask for forgiveness later if it was one of those in which it violated the current laws that were on the books due to the extreme, I guess, measures that were caused by the natural disaster. We also want to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information. Right now, we currently have contact information on all our entities. However, we've realized from these other disasters that having a contact at a bank or a credit union location does not suffice if there is not a bank and credit union building there any longer. And so we need additional type contact measures, whether it be personal cell phones or people located in other regions of the state. We want to detail the steps for contacting the institutions regarding the ATMs and ensure that for those that may have mobile branches or mobile ATMs, that who those people are and can they be utilized by other banks, kind of joint efforts. Will the Federal Reserve have enough cash on hand in the proper locations to dispense that cash out to the consumers when needed? Seek assistance from the trade associations to have them encourage their members to offer concessions to customers adversely affected by the disaster, such as waiving check cashing fees for non-customers. We're going to prepare, we're in the process of updating our website now to prepare consumer information where they can go to our website. We already have it where they can find many things about a lot of things, a lot of tips. But we want to expand that for more of a hands-on, how do you prevent some of these personal tragedies that could happen to you financially when a disaster hits, as well as if you are affected by it, how to recover quickly from those disasters. Encourage institutions to offer flexibility and waive late payment fees on loans, not to impose penalties for early withdrawal of CDs used to fund recovery efforts, things such as that. Coordinate with the Governor's Office of Consumer Affairs and possibly other state and local agencies on consumer awareness activities. Conduct regular conference calls with the trade associations to monitor recovery efforts and progress. Keep federal and other state regulators apprised of the situations in Georgia related to the disaster, including business closings and openings, bank openings and closings. And basically serve as an information clearinghouse for our institutions, regulators, and the public. We're in touch with the FDIC today, as a matter of fact, and by March 1st, we're going to have our associates get together and to start formulating the actually nuts and bolts of a plan to expand what we currently have to address more of the Hurricane Katrina and Rita type disasters. Any questions regarding that?
Let me, if I could, Commissioner Braswell, if you would introduce just for a moment all of the people that you have here with you from the Department of Banking and Finance to the members. And then members, if you have a question, if you will press your button, then I'll recognize you, and then you may ask your question.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Mills. I have with me Senior Deputy Commissioner George Reynolds and Deputy Commissioner for Legal and Consumer Administration, Consumer Affairs, Leslie Bechtel.
Thank you, Commissioner. Glad to have you with us. And I encourage the members of this committee, if you remember early on, my philosophy is that legislation should be a last resort, not a first reaction. And that means when we have opportunities, some people call them problems, that arise in our communities, then I encourage you to go to that financial institution in your community, try to work it out. If it can't be worked out there, then take it to the next level, which would be our Department of Banking and Finance, and work with our commissioner and others there to try to resolve it. And as a last resort, legislation, if it can't be solved. But, at this time, I'd like to recognize Representative Coleman for question.
Commissioner, where's your backup data system located?
We have ours in College Park. We are located on the northeast side of Atlanta, and we have our backup site on the southeast side of Atlanta.
Have you discussed with the Georgia, golly, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but our data operation
Georgia Technology Authority?
Yeah, the Georgia Technology Authority, about combining your system?
I
am not aware that we've done that, no, sir.
We do have a backup server available in College Park, so we basically take our data down there and run the computers from our College Park office and did that successfully.
Is it a private operation? Have you contracted that out, or are you doing it yourself?
We do it internally. And we did test it in November 2004, totally as if our system was down and we could not go to our main office. We had the personnel go to the protocol as far as what locations to go to and to see if the backup system worked, and it worked well at that time.
that College Park office is our field office for that purchase too.
That's right.
All right. Any more questions, Representative Copeland?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Calvin Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I don't have a question for you, but I do want to compliment you and your staff for being proactive and forward-thinking on this. It's very bureaucratic and very much enjoyed by this committee because we do have the possibility of natural and unnatural disasters in the future. And the better prepared we are in the banking community, I think we'll be serving Georgians well. So thank you very much, and keep up that good work.
Thank you. We hope to have the plan finalized. Our goal is by June of this year.
Any other questions from the members of the committee? All right, Commissioner, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
and sharing with us today. And again, let me just encourage the members of the committee to get to know the Commissioner. And we want to use that resource that's available to us as well as deputy commissioners. And thank you for coming today. Our next item on the agenda is House Bill 966. Representative Rob Tilley, at this time we'd like to ask you to come and to present your bill to the committee. And I'd like to ask, if I could, Representative David Knight, if you would. I think we had talked about allotting you 15 minutes, and you could divide that, share that with speakers that we had talked about earlier. I know there are a number of people that have signed up to speak afterward. I've got about 8 that have signed up, and as time goes along, we'll see how we will do that. But at this time, Representative Tilley, we'll turn it over to you to present House Bill 966.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. And it's good to see such a full committee room here. I didn't know there was such interest in my little bill, but it's always good to have interested folks. And I thank you for the speed with which you've scheduled a hearing on this bill. I know that it's very difficult, as busy as the session is, and I appreciate the committee members' time in coming to hear about it. What House Bill 966 does is allow an individual to place what's called a security freeze on their credit report. This idea was brought to me by an area council president of my Cobb Chamber of Commerce, who pointed out that our businesses in that area were losing a lot to identity theft. People will often think of the consumer, and that's appropriate, but businesses are often left holding the bag when this crime is taking place. 10 states currently allow consumers the ability to freeze their credit, and I would like to see Georgia consider joining them. Congress is also debating a version of the credit freeze. Before I go through the bill in detail, I think it's important to understand the massive nature of the problem of identity theft. It's one of the fastest growing crimes in Georgia. During the past 4 years, the number of Georgia residents who have filed identity theft complaints has grown over 300%. Last year, Georgia ranked 9th in the nation in identity theft victims per capita. These complaints are just the tip of the iceberg. Only 3% of identity theft victims actually report a crime. They generally just go through the process of clearing up the bad credit card and clearing up their credit reports and never actually get a police report filed. So the Federal Trade Commission estimates that more than 263,000 Georgians are actually victims of identity theft in every given year in some way or another. The classic case of identity theft, for the members of the committee that may not have been as aware of this problem, is as follows. A criminal obtains access to personal information. This can happen many ways. A lot of times they take credit card applications right out of your mailbox. Clark Howard now advises people to put a lock on their mailbox and use a key to open the mail. That's how an awful lot of it happens. The person then uses the personal information they've obtained to open fraudulent credit accounts in your name. These lines of credit are then used to purchase thousands of dollars worth of goods, and the first time you know that this is being done in your name is when a collection agency for the new debt happens to call you wanting to know where the money is, or perhaps a fraud report comes through the credit reporting agencies. Again, the crime has already happened. The Federal Trade Commission estimates that identity thieves cost Americans $52.6 billion in 2004. And in a case that demonstrates how vulnerable everyday folks are, in 1999, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time, a man named John Shalikashvili, fairly unusual name, had his personal information stolen because it was entered in the congressional record. Because of some of the medals he'd won, they took his name out of the congressional record, opened 273 credit cards in the name of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and ran up over $200,000 worth of debt. if it can happen to him, it sure can happen to me and any one of us. New account fraud, such as that in the case of credit cards I just mentioned, is especially expensive. It costs our businesses an average of $10,200 per victim. Usually, the consumer isn't liable for those charges, but the business is left holding the bag. If someone steals your name and goes to Walmart and buys a television for $200, and they weren't really you, usually Walmart is left there without their television and without their money, and so our businesses are often the ones left holding the bag. Here's how the bill works, and I'd be glad to answer as many questions as the committee has on this. House Bill 966 is designed to stop the crime before it happens by freezing access to your credit file. What does that mean? A security freeze is the right to control access to your own credit report by protecting it with a password, similar to the PIN number that you use at the ATM. A potential creditor will not issue credit unless they can see your credit report, and so thieves will not be able to get new credit in your name regardless of how much of your personal information they have. Consumers are able to lift or thaw the security freeze as they wish from time to time to open new credit. All they have to do is give this new PIN number. Section A of the bill provides definition for use in the statute. Sections B through K provide in detail the process for requesting the freeze, how it is to be honored, and how the consumer can go about lifting it. The essence is this: the consumer makes the request to place a security freeze on his or her credit by certified mail to the credit reporting agency. We didn't want to put too much of a burden on the good folks at the credit reporting agencies, and so certified mail doesn't require them to set up email or have people available to answer phones, those sorts of things. The agency then has 5 business days to place the freeze on the account. The credit agency then sends written confirmation of the security freeze to the consumer and provides him or her with a unique PIN number or password that they can use to take the freeze off when they're applying for a loan or otherwise seek credit. Once the freeze is in place, the reporting agency may not release credit information to a third party without authorization from the consumer. If the consumer wishes to allow the credit report to be accessed, he or she may do so by contacting the credit reporting agency and providing the PIN number or password. The credit agencies are permitted under the bill to charge those who have not been a victim of identity theft $10 for this service. This is an attempt to reach a reasonable compromise. Consumer advocates think that the service should be free. I've attempted in the bill to recognize that there may be a cost to the credit agencies for this service and allow them to recoup that from people who have not yet been a victim by making the $10 charge. And, of course, you can then take the freeze off at any time. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, I don't know how much of my time I've taken, probably 7 minutes or so. I had 2 people that I wanted to be sure the committee did hear from, and then I'd be available for as many questions, or I could take those now, whichever pleases the chair more.
Probably about 7 minutes left on your allotted time, so we can either do it one of 2 ways. I'll let you choose. You can either take questions from the committee now, and we'll hold you for the remainder time, or you can ask them to speak now, whichever you'd like to do.
I'd be glad to go ahead and take questions since I've just given the outline of maybe fresh in your mind.
Take questions from the committee at this time. If you wish to be recognized, mash your button and we'll recognize you. Representative Lester Jackson.
Yes, sir. Small question. You said the victim's going to have to pay a fee of $10?
If you are a victim of identity theft and you filed a police report, the service would be free to you. And if you have not been a victim yet but are just attempting to anticipate what may happen in the future, in my version of the bill, I've allowed the credit agency to charge $10 for the service.
You don't think that's a little excessive?
I have heard that argument from the consumer folks, and I leave that to the judgment of the committee. What I've attempted to do is recognize that we are asking the credit agencies to do something, to be able to administrate this freeze. They already do it in 10 states, and they may have to do it throughout the country soon anyway. But in light of placing a new burden upon them, I thought that it was reasonable where the person hadn't been a victim of a crime to allow them to charge that amount to recoup their expenses. But
sir, I heard you say earlier that it wouldn't be no charge. You know, there's not like an email or a telephone number. You know, there's no one answering telephone or no one looking for emails to correspond. So it looks like no extra work for the credit bureau.
Well, my hope is that they would set up easier ways for people to handle it, but at the least they are putting a new classification onto existing credit accounts, and they probably would have to do some sort of staffing to handle just the receipt of the certified letters if that is what they choose to do. So I do think there'll be some expense associated with administering this, just as with any regulation.
So you're saying that non-victims become a victim with this legislation because we're charging them a fee?
Well, they get a fee. I pay lots of fees, and I don't think I'm a victim every time I pay one. But, in some states, it is made free to all consumers. That's an argument that can be made. It's perfectly reasonable. But I've attempted to anticipate, to some extent, what the arguments against the bill would be and try to head those off.
How many other states have this?
Representative Jackson, I'm sorry, I want to ask if you could ask one more. We've asked about
No, sir.
questions now, and we've got other news we want
Yes,
to
sir.
ask. I want you to have plenty of time to ask your questions, but I want to be time conscious also.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll come back.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bob Holmes.
I just have a two-parter. I think it's an excellent concept. First part question is, how long have the other 10 states been in existence in terms of using this? And secondly, how has it affected their percentages of identity or actual numbers in identity theft? I mean, is it working, I guess, is the single question in which those two are parts.
Most of the freezes that I'm aware of, there have been 10 done in the states. The federal one has not been enacted yet, have been put in since 2002. There may be one or two that were earlier than that, and I think it's too early to tell what the numbers are. Part of the problem here is that since this crime is overwhelmingly not reported to law enforcement, it's very hard to produce that sort of hard data. You're sort of relying on estimates from the Federal Trade Commission or from the credit bureaus to see how many times they've had to clear people's records. So I can't give you as hard an answer as I would like on that.
I was just thinking, this is my last one, that you gave the number of Georgia being ninth in identity theft, and 263,000 Georgians are victims, and I was wondering if, in fact, that's enough time, 3 years, to have some data that would indicate that either those states that have introduced the freeze have improved and their standards, they're lowering where they rank in terms of identity thefts, and I just thought you might have some data which would be some empirical verification of whether it's really working and achieving its purpose. That was the only.
I can't give you data from the state before a freeze and after the freeze, in part because it's so rarely reported.
All right, Representative Chuck Scheid has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Delaney, if I understand this correctly, we do this, or an individual would do this through a written statement to the credit agency. Is that correct?
That's right.
If I can access a credit report through any of the main three credit reporting agencies over the internet to get that information, have you made any kind of means in here that can be done through the internet so it would be less of a cost?
The bill states that the credit agencies may establish procedures by phone, email, or other ways to handle this, and my guess is that they will, because I think that'll be administratively easier for them. In my mind, as we were drafting the bill, my concern was what happens if you have a dispute where there's a large credit card bill and the consumer says, look, I requested a freeze. And they say, well, we have no record of that. Well, I called you on Tuesday. Now you're in a factual dispute that is almost impossible to resolve. The existence of a certified letter really helps to nail that down, because the letter's been sent, it's been signed for, there's record that the freeze was requested. And so I have put in place a requirement that this certified mail process be done because it's more formal, but it is cumbersome. And my hope would be that eventually we get to an email or a phone system where the agencies and the consumers feel reasonably secure.
Yes, sir.
It's typical in a credit relationship with a lender that if the account became delinquent or some problem that the lender is aware of, that there's sort of a way for the lender to redo another credit report to see if there's a change in status. Does this bill restrict that lender from accessing the information to see how their clients are doing?
If the account has a freeze on it, subsequent to that first loan being there, the consumer would have to permit that by use of the thaw or giving over the ID number.
To get the new credit.
That's right. And then to access a more recent credit report, a later credit report, you would have to do that each time. Or what can happen is the consumer can say, I authorize, and this would probably be what happens in your case, I authorize this lender to check me at any time. Anyone else that wants access to my credit is subject to the freeze. That kind of sort of open-ended thaw for a particular lender is available under the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Got Representative Maxwell and then Representative Coleman. Representative Howard Maxwell. I'm sorry, we had you up here.
Those are the kind of questions I like, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Terry Coleman.
If you just included some form of dispute resolution, or resolution on, just, let's assume that a thief was good enough to get your information, and also go in and freeze the account, or freeze the credit information. Do you have a process in here to help clarify that? If they can steal your information, they can also get in and freeze the credit information.
It had not occurred to me that a thief would seek to freeze someone's credit rather than take advantage to their credit, and so that is not addressed in the bill, but I'd be glad to look at that and put in place some process. We ask when the agencies are implementing the freeze that they get certain personal, information, or at least be able to satisfy the persons who this has.
Usually something like the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, which is easily obtainable. And what would concern me is unless you have included in here some form of dispute resolution or some form of clarification, some way to do it by the credit company, credit bureau, or the credit companies themselves, then you could, a thief, they wouldn't need but a couple of weeks to get to freeze it, hold the information for themselves, and then do more damage than ever. I would hope you'd look at that whenever you.
I'd be glad to.
All right, we'll take one more question from Representative Lester Jackson.
Chairman. Yes, with you doing your research with other states, how many people would you think would use this service in our great state of Georgia?
My hope would be that it would be a lot. The experience in the other states has been, and again, this is a fairly new thing, and so we're only 2-3 years into it at the state where it's been in place the longest, has been that very few people take advantage of it the first year, but that it really picks up steam in years 2 and 3 and becomes a much broader usage. And so I can't tell you how many people would take advantage of it the first year. A lot of that would just depend on how many people knew about it, and that's sort of
But I'm saying, like the third year in your research with other states, is it 2-3 million? States this size, 2-3 million.
I wish I could give you a good answer, but I just don't know the answer to that.
I had a question,
Yes, sir.
if you would indulge me for a moment. You may have already touched on this earlier, but what happens in the case of a freeze? Let's say I call and I freeze my account, and then during that time, how is my credit scored? If there's a continual running credit score kept on your credit, whether you have good credit, bad credit, how will that be tabulated? If you had someone who had bad credit and then they say, hey, there's a way for me to freeze this, how will that work in the real world under this bill?
I don't think it will have a meaningful impact, because once the freeze has gone on, new account activity will stop, and so there won't be an effect on credit ratings from new activity. If you're still not paying old bills that were put in place before the freeze, your credit rating could certainly go down. As you pay old debts, your credit rating could certainly still go up. All the freeze does is lock down the opening of new accounts. And so I think your credit rating would still be a fluctuating number based upon outstanding debts and obligations.
You have a remainder of about 7 to 8 minutes if you'd like to ask
Yes,
someone
sir.
to speak. I know there's several more questions, but I'm going to ask the committee if we could reserve right now.
Of course.
Let's hear from your speaker.
There were two people that I wanted to make sure the committee heard from. The first is Jill Johnson from the Public Interest Research Group. They've done a lot of work in this area in other states. And Kimberly Charles from Atlanta Legal Aid, who represents a lot of consumers who are trying to clear their credit.
Just ask that they state their name and who they represent, and be conscious of the time.
I will do that. 7 minutes, y'all.
No pressure, no pressure. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jill Johnson. I'm a consumer advocate with the Georgia Public Interest Research Group. Georgia PIRG is a statewide environmental and consumer advocacy organization representing more than 4,000 citizen members across the state. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I also want to let you know I brought a full copy of my statement in longer version. I can pass that out to everyone. I'll try to keep my remarks here brief.
Right. If you'll give those to our aide, she'll pass them out.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We are here today in support of House Bill 966 with changes, which we will refer to as the Georgia Identity Theft Prevention Act, because it puts consumers back in control of deciding who may access their credit report and can stop identity theft before it starts. We are also passing around a fact sheet that we've put together with AARP Georgia and Georgia Watch, detailing some of the benefits of a security freeze and some of the improvements that we could see that we'd like to see to make the legislation even more efficient. At its core, the Georgia Identity Theft Prevention Act prevents new fraud. New account fraud occurs when a thief uses your personal, private information to take out new credit in your name. This kind of fraud relies on credit reporting agencies' willingness to sell your credit report to anyone with a few pieces of your personal information. This bill empowers Georgians to prevent new account fraud by giving them a security freeze, which Representative Tilley described. According to the Federal Trade Commission, new account fraud costs much more than existing account fraud for both businesses and victims. Further, problems from new account fraud are harder to resolve. New account fraud victims spend an average of 60 hours resolving their problems, and it also takes them longer to clear their record. 39% of instances took 3 months or longer. Further, the consequences of new account fraud tend to be somewhat severe. New account fraud victims are much more likely than other victims to suffer the following difficulties: credit card problems, harassment by a debt collector, loan rejection, banking problems, insurance rejection, utilities cut off, or even a civil suit filed against them or a criminal investigation. The types of new account fraud are diverse, making it difficult to anticipate risks. New account fraud extends not only to, say, credit cards, but also to loans, telephone service, checking and savings accounts, internet accounts, insurance, and others. And that's why we need a security freeze. So I'd also like to take a couple of minutes to address the misconceptions out there about security freezes. First, what you may hear, credit reporting agencies have been known to claim that a security freeze is not necessary because they already offer fraud alerts and monitoring services to consumers. Well, let me tell you that a fraud alert is not the same as a security freeze. Although fraud alerts are helpful, they're merely an after-the-fact measure. And unfortunately for many Georgians, this is just not enough. The alarm provided by a fraud alert only serves to notify them that they may have to begin the arduous process of undoing the work of an identity thief. Further, fraud alerts can be expensive. For example, Equifax's 3-in-1 monitoring service costs consumers $129 a year. The Chamber of Commerce also claims that this legislation would place an additional cost on businesses. However, fraud currently costs businesses far more than a security freeze will. As Representative Tilley mentioned, a recent Federal Trade Commission survey found that the dollar value of the crime was $52.6 billion with a B, dollars in 2004, and much of that cost is accrued by businesses, be it the credit card companies or the merchants themselves. Also, security freezes do not complicate employee verification hiring, employee verification in the hiring process, as the Chamber mistakenly asserts. A consumer-friendly security freeze would actually have the added benefit of obliging a potential employer to notify candidates when it desires to review sensitive personal information in making hiring decisions. Moreover, a security freeze will deter employment fraud. Undocumented workers and criminals who are using stolen identities will be exposed. Finally, we do share the Chamber's concerns about security freezes slowing consumers' access to credit and services. And as written, the legislation allows credit reporting agencies to take as long as 5 business days to place the security freeze or thaw after they've received a request from a consumer. It's simply too long. Okay, thanks. We know that credit reporting agencies are already able to make a credit report or credit score instantly available for the purpose of granting credit. They should be able to grant a security freeze or thaw with the same swiftness, instantly, or at least in the same business day. We also suggest several other changes to the Georgia Identity Theft Prevention Act to make it as effective as possible. Some of these have been changes that have been brought up by members of the committee already. First, as defined, credit information may be interpreted to mean only information found on a credit report that's utilized by an insurer. And we urge the committee to adopt the stronger definition of credit information used by Consumers Union and the state PIRGs in our model Clean Credit and Identity Theft Protection Act that's included in the handout. Also, we urge the committee to require credit bureaus to phase in procedures involving the use of phone, fax, internet, and other electronic media to receive and process requests for consumers to place or temporarily lift a security freeze. We note the more convenient we make a security freeze for consumers, the more likely they are to do so and stop identity thieves in their tracks. And finally, the bill requires consumers to pay what we think are hefty fees to credit reporting agencies to place or lift a freeze. Given that there are 3 national credit reporting bureaus, under the current language, Georgians would have to pay $30 to place a freeze and up to $36 to lift it. We think these fees are too much of a burden and will hinder the effectiveness of the freeze, especially for low-income Georgians. We urge the committee to reduce these fees to, say, $3 or eliminate them entirely. Thank you for your time. I also want to just mention 2 gentlemen in the audience, or at least one gentleman in the audience who's Kent Chandler. Kent, if you could raise your hand. He's a supporter of ours, and he actually just found out a few weeks ago that he's been a victim of identity theft. He drove down here today from Woodstock to share his story, and I know we're short on time, but he's happy to talk with any member of the committee to describe the process that he's going through right now.
Sure, and let me just say that, had we known ahead of time that you were coming from Woodstock, we'd have been glad to accommodate that. As I shared with Representative Tilley earlier, there would be a 15-minute time slot. And grace is a wonderful thing. I enjoy it every day. And so we're going to give you 2 more minutes of grace to your other speakers. Thank you very much. And let me just tell you before we go any further, I don't want the committee to think that we're just rushing through this process. This is a very important subject. And looking at it, I can foresee that I would like to make a recommendation in a few moments that we put this in a study committee and study it thoroughly rather than take a quick, rash action. We've got at least, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. We've got at least 9 people that have signed up to speak. If we hear all 9 of you, we're going to be here a while. There are other committees waiting to have meetings in here. Since this is going to a study committee, what I'd like to ask, and I'm just going to, out of the 9 that signed up, I'm just going to take the first 2 and we'll give you about 2 minutes apiece. But let's now, Representative Tilley, if we could hear from your other speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the grace. Very generous.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Charles, and I'm a staff attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid Society, and I represent low-income victims of identity theft along with other consumer issues and housing issues. Additionally, I was and am a victim of identity theft myself. I am coming just to tell you the basic point, which is that a credit freeze is really the only means that an identity theft victim has to keep from being re-victimized. Once you find out you're a victim of identity theft, typically what happens is someone uses your Social Security number excuse me, to open up various accounts, anything from trying to buy a car to getting a credit card, any sort of credit. And you go through the arduous process of cleaning off your credit reports and clearing your name with creditors, and you clean your report up. But the fact remains that the perpetrator still has your information and can use it at any time. And a credit freeze would stop them from being able to do that. So I liken identity theft to a financial cancer because it can come back at any time. And this is really the only means that the victim has to keep from being re-victimized. So I ask that you consider this bill and that it be made into law. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And Representative Talea, thank you for presenting the bill. At this time, I want to ask the first two, and I just took this on first come, first served, so no preferential treatment here. But Kirby Thompson, and Kirby, it appears that you're with Equifax. If you would just give us a 2-minute. I know that's asking a lot.
2 minutes is adequate. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kirby Thompson, I'm Vice President of Equifax, and we're one of the national consumer reporting agencies that was referred to. We're based here in Atlanta. We've been here about 100 years. We always welcome a chance to talk about identity fraud because clearly identity fraud is something that we oppose because we want people to have accurate credit, and accurate credit information. Our credit files is what we sell to our customers. So identity fraud really is a victim, for our business, and certainly the report that we sell, if it's not correct, then we don't have a product that we can sell, and we're a publicly traded company, and we don't have any customers. So we certainly want to support steps against identity fraud. But I guess I would say that I think that this bill, House Bill 966, is really kind of a drastic step in that really it interferes with the delicate balance between consumers and business. As been referred to today, let me just mention some of the things that are currently in federal law that gives consumers tools to protect against identity theft. First of all, there was a mention about credit card offers that get put in your mailbox. Today, you can call an 800 number at Equifax, and you can opt out of pre-approved offers of credit. So if you don't want to get those kind of offers, you can certainly take your name off those lists, and we do those every day. You can get a fraud alert. Under federal law, a fraud alert is free of charge. A fraud alert is something that you don't have to be a victim of fraud. If you lose your wallet, if at any point in time you would like to put a fraud alert in your file, you call an 800 number, and we put that in your credit file. And that means that any time a credit grantor, lender, whomever pulls your credit report, there'll be a fraud alert there, and it's up to that lender to do further authentication, further verification to make sure, indeed, you're the customer that they want to deal with. Third, we also have something that with a police report, if you have been a victim of identity fraud, you can block trade lines. If you show us that you've been a victim of fraud, and then you show us that this trade line could be fraudulent, we block that. Under federal law, we have an obligation to block that, and that's also shared immediately with the other two credit reporting agencies. And then I guess the most important thing that's happened under federal law and for many years under Georgia law is you get a chance to get your credit report free of charge. In Georgia, you get 2 free copies of your credit report. Under federal law, you get an additional 1 free copy of your credit report. You can go to a website called annualcreditreport.com, and you can get a copy from all 3 of your credit agencies. These are all prescribed under federal law. Credit reports are only provided under a very strict law that's called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. There are a number of things that the Federal Trade Commission does.
I ask if you could. I'm trying to be pretty strict and fair
I understand.
to this, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I would be unfair to the others if I didn't ask the same. So
absolutely,
there's going to be further time,
and I'll be available for questions if anybody needs that
to study this, and I would encourage all of you that have come. And while I know there are those of us that are here, and our time is being paid, I tell you that my feelings go out to most of the citizens who took their time and drove here and not even being recognized. So again, I apologize to you for that. But had we known ahead of time, we would have worked that out. And we will have a study committee where you'll have ample time to share before then. So thank you, Mr.
Was there a question that
We're not going to take any
Thank
questions
you.
right now. I'm afraid if we open that up, we'll be here even longer.
Absolutely.
Thank you, though. I'd like to ask Brenda Jones, who had signed up, if you would, Brenda, state who you're with, and you'll have 2 minutes as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for a few minutes to share our concerns with you about this bill. I'm Brenda Jones, and I'm Director of Government Affairs at CheckFree. CheckFree is an online banking and bill payment processor for all the top banks in the nation, many billers. We provide that back-end service to the banks, to about 14 million consumers across the United States. As part of our commitment to providing a safe and secure environment for almost $1 billion that flows through the ACH system at the Federal Reserve every night, CheckFree has created a discreet and very dynamic enrollment process that was designed specifically to protect consumers and their identity based on information that's contained in the credit report. If consumers restrict access to that personally identifiable information when they freeze their credit file, then we are not able to authenticate identity, and the check-free enrollment process stops, and potentially we lose a customer right there. I think consumers are becoming much more sophisticated and better educated about ways to protect their personally identifiable information, and we have lots of statistics that show that the number of incidents has actually come down for identity theft and fraud. In a recent Javelin study, the reports of ID theft in the United States have actually declined in each of the last 3 years. I think consumers may feel that freezing their credit file actually gives them more control of their information and their identity. We believe it actually puts them at risk. Turning a file off and on numerous times opens up the opportunity for errors to occur and for fraudsters to intervene. We know from industry research that fraudsters are smarter and swifter than some of us in legitimate businesses many times. Access to credit file information is part of the free flow of information that we talk a lot about in public policy debates. This bill, if it was passed, would restrict access to information that would ultimately protect consumers and safeguard the identity. So while this could be viewed as simply an inconvenience for businesses like CheckFree or our partners at Equifax or many of the banks that use us, we believe it has the potential to harm and not help consumers, and we would respectfully ask that you carefully consider these concerns as you continue to deliberate House Bill 966. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And it would be the recommendation of the chair that at this time what I'd like to do is to ask the Subcommittee of Financial Institutions and Services to study House Bill 966, Representative Tooley, and Representative Calvin Hill is the chair of that, and Vice Chair is Ben Bridges, and Representative Jack Murphy is the Secretary of that committee. In your folders, you should have a list of who is on that, and so I would ask you, Representative Tooley, to work with the committee, and those that are here today who are concerned about this bill, I would just say that there are a number of concerns, and I, as an individual, have great concerns about identity theft, personally. I also think that as the bill is currently worded, there is a long domino effect that we need to look into thoroughly before we take swift action. Appreciate you bringing this bill before the committee, and the Subcommittee of Financial Institutions and Services will study it. And one other item on the not on the agenda, I believe the Georgia Credit Union has a brief announcement they'd like to make to the committee. Just Mike, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. My name is Mike Culbertson. I just want to make sure that you all are aware we're looking forward to hosting you all and your guests at our annual dinner for the Banking Committee tomorrow evening at Cafeteria Club. Reception starts at 6 and the dinner is thereafter, so we'll see you all. Appreciate the privilege.
All right, thank you for the invitation. This meeting is adjourned.